Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Kiddushin Daf Lamed Tet. We're going to finish up orla and kelaim sugya, and then we're going to get to a new Mishna, which actually is a great Mishna to relate to Yom Kippur as it's coming, about mitzvot in general and the value of mitzvot. And that will be how we end our daf. But before that, we have to get through our kelaim and orla sugyas. So we ended with this Mishna that actually I want to point out is a very complicated Mishna to understand. There's a lot of debates about what exactly the language of it is. Even in our Gemara, they're going to debate the language. And also in different manuscripts, there were different words used. And even what exactly the whole concept of what's going on is very complicated to understand. So I'm going to try to read it through again and explain it in at least one way, the way it's explained, but know that it's kind of complicated and hard to really understand exactly the details of what exactly is permitted. So the Mishnah there says what we're trying to figure out. We quoted this Mishnah, which basically starts with these cases of safek, orla, and then ends with chadash is asur min Torah, because it's forbidden by Torah law. We said orla is halacha, kelaim is midivrei sofer. Okay, that's really the end of the Mishnah. And then what happens is the Gemara quotes first the end of that Mishnah, and then we have this big debate. Halacha means halacha l'moshe Sinai, or halacha means just a minhag. People just decided we're going to keep orla outside of Israel, even though there was really no mitzvah to do it. And then comes Ula in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. I want you to remember this. The Rabbi Yochanan is the one who has the stricter approach and thinks it's actually halacha l'moshe Sinai. Keep this in mind because we're going to see Rabbi Yochanan a few times in our sugya today with that same more stringent approach to how to treat these mitzvot outside of Israel. Remember also he lived in Israel, which maybe affects things, not sure. And then they say, but wait, Ula says to Rabbi Yehuda, who quoted Shmuel, saying that it's only a minhag, that people just decided to keep this, but it wasn't really forbidden. Well, he says, if that's the case, and kelaim, everyone agrees is a rabbinic prohibition, so orla should be less strict than kelaim. And in fact, in this Mishnah, we see it's more strict, okay? Or at least it should be the same, okay? At least the minhag could be the same as rabbinic, but it's certainly not going to be more strict. And this shows that it's more strict. So now we're going to see, again, we distinguish between three locations. Israel, we distinguish Syria, which is close to Israel, and therefore there's concern. People will see people doing this and think that in Israel you could do the same. So we're going to be a little stricter. And then you have outside of Israel, completely far from Israel, where the laws are going to be different. And in what area the law is different? In safek orla, meaning you have fruits, you're not sure what they are. There's a reason to believe it's possible they're orla, but you don't really know. So we're going to be more lenient. And how are we going to be lenient? So again, it's a little bit tricky, but so in Israel, since it's a Torah law, of course, we're going to be strict. That's safek orla ba'aretz asur. I'm going back about 6 lines from the bottom of yesterday's daf. B'Suria mutal. If you have a case, you don't know what the story is, maybe it's orla, you don't have to worry about it. In Chutzpit, you can even be more lenient than that. What does that mean? Yoreh v'lokach, you can go into a field. Okay, forget about the guy selling outside his field, and you know in his field maybe there's orla, there's not orla, and you don't know what he's selling you. Maybe he didn't even sell it from his field. Maybe he's selling from someone else's field. By the way, generally they explain that we're talking about a Gentile selling outside a field, but the field would have to be a Jewish field because there's no laws of orla for a Gentile. That's just another point about this that's not so clear. In other words, he's selling from some Jewish field. Otherwise, what's the issue here? Now, it doesn't even say Gentile here. Whether it's even Gentile or not is a good question. But in any case, I don't want to get too bogged down by these details because we could spend an hour trying to go through the different commentaries on this Mishnah and we'll never get through our daf. So basically, we then have outside of Israel, you can even go into the field where you're closer to the orla. You can even theoretically, some people think you can watch, right? This guy can pick orla fruits, sell them to you. You can be pretty sure they're orla, but as long as eventually you're locate, you just have to make sure you don't see him actually picking them. Okay? Which is very strange. It sounds like you can know they're orla possibly. Some people say, no, of course you can't. But some people think you can know they're orla as long as you don't watch him pick the orla fruits and then sell them directly to you, it's okay. Again, the nuances and what exactly is permitted, many different opinions about this. By kelaim, it says that, again, you have this vineyard, which also has grains growing very close to the vines. So, nimkar chutzala, if he's standing outside the field, it's total, right? Ba'aretz asur, outside of Israel, for sure, it's forbidden because he could be selling you stuff where it grew together. B'Suria, it's going to be permitted because it's just a safek. B'chutz la'aretz, yoreh v'lokate, it doesn't say yoreh v'lokach, it says you can go in and pick yourself. Now, some people say it's also yoreh v'lokach, Okay, different problems with the girsa. But again, so either it means you can go by from inside the field, not just outside where there's all more of a doubt where it even came from, but even inside the field where you know it's coming from there. And it sounds like even he can pick it and you can know that it was kelaim and it's fine. As long as you don't pick it by hand. As long as you didn't pick it, it's no problem. Whatever this means exactly, again, I'm going to leave this a little bit open in terms of the interpretation, but it's clear that this is already more lenient than the previous, which is where the question comes in. That's what Ula says to him. This doesn't make sense, according to you. Right? For me, this makes perfect sense because kelaim is only rabbinic and orla is more serious because it's halach l'moshe m'sinai. But according to you, nitnei ozev zeh yorev elokech, ozev zeh yorev elokeh. And he skips the end of the sentence, but basically the language, the law by each should be the same, okay, or if not, even more lenient. But basically he said, if everything was the same, kelaim and orla, then I'd say, fine, the minhag matches the Isur Midivrei Sofrim. In other words, when they did the custom in the same way. They decided, let's keep the laws in the same way. But to have the custom be more strict than the kelaim makes no sense. So, Hamar le Shmuel le Rav Anan. So now they say, this isn't a question because Shmuel said to Rabbanan, and Shmuel is the one who we're attacking right now, and he was attacking Rabbi Yehuda, but about Shmuel's position, Tanei ozev zeh yorev elokech, ozev zeh yorev elokeh. It's a mistake in the Mishna and the transmission of the Mishna. Really, it should have been both are the same. Either the more strict or the more lenient. Doesn't really make a difference, Shmuel's saying. I mean, obviously it makes a difference in terms of practically what you could do, but in terms of what you're questioning, Rabbi Yehuda says, Shmuel already said, that they're the same and that this isn't the right version of the Mishnah that you're quoting. And just to point out, Mar, the son of Ravana, taught both the same and the more lenient position. He says, as long as you don't pick it yourself, it's fine. And now we're going to have all sorts of kulas that come out of this. This is very hard for us to understand, I think, in a halachic kind of way, why this works, but I find this kind of fascinating. Amalei Levi l'Shmuel. So Levi says to Shmuel, Aryoch, my leader, lion, you're so strong. It's just a term of endearment. Sipek li va'ana echo. If you have orla, why don't you pick it? Don't tell me it's orla, right? What does it say in the Mishnah? If we go by the lenient opinion, as long as you didn't pick it yourself. And now it's going to seem it's not even if a Gentile is selling it to you, but your fellow Jew can just take orla from his tree, give it to you, decide not to tell you that it's orla, and he has no responsibility, or she has no responsibility to basically say to you, by the way, you should know this is orla. So he says, give me some, and I'll eat it, because as long as right, it's like it's saying, what I don't know doesn't hurt me. And that's the whole law of safek orla. You don't have any obligation to tell somebody. This is, again, it's very hard to fathom. What I know it's orla, I can give it to you, you can eat it, and I don't have to tell you. It seems insane. But we're going to see that basically they say safek orla doesn't exist. And again, this is really an issue of what does safek mean. But their approach is that safek orla does not exist outside of Israel. This isn't in Israel. This is only outside of Israel. There's just no issue of safek orla. So, interesting. You're saying it's the opposite of a lifnei iver in a sort of way. I see you're writing that, Miriam, on the chat, which is very interesting because some people say, what happens to lifnei iver here? And what they're saying is there's a unique halakha here that there is no law of lifnei iver here. Okay, it doesn't exist. It really should, right? Like every halakha, because you're basically lifnei iver means don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person, don't cause someone to sin without telling them. But in this case, it's not forbidden for him, so therefore it's not lifnei iver. So good, you're bringing that up. Rav Avuya Rabba bar Rav Hanan misapye sipuke l'hadadi. So Rav Avuya and Rabba bar Rav Hanan would actually each give orla fruits to the other. He had orla fruits, he'd give it to him, and he would give him his, and they would eat as if safek orla, it's not a problem. It's really hard to fathom that they did this. Now, Amre Harife de Pumbedita, and the Harifim, the sharp-minded people in Pumbedita said, Ein orla b'chutzat. They said there is no orla at all in Chutz La'aretz. So now there comes about a little bit of an argument here. Shachala Rav Yehuda l'kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yehuda sends before Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, look at what these Harifei Pumbedita are saying. What do I do with this? Shalach le, Rabbi Yochanan sends back to him the following message. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda's in Babel. This is what's going on. People are saying there's no orla. in Pumbedita, Rabbi Yochanan sends back a message from Israel, and he says to him, Stom sfeka va'abei vada'a, va'achrez al perotehem shetunim gniza. V'chol omer ein orla b'chutz haaretz lo yeh lo nin v'nechem mashlich hevel b'goral b'kal Hashem. Comes out very strong, and he says, listen, these people are coming to wrong conclusions because safek, once you permit, and this is the danger, and this is why it seems so absurd what they were saying before about the safek. Now you understand, he says, forget safek orla is permitted. Hide that halacha. Do not tell people that safek orla is permitted, because then what happens? It becomes a free-for-all. If safek is permitted, then they're going to say, oh, it must be. If a doubt is permitted, then it must be it's actually not forbidden at all. And then, right, he says, take those fruits that are orla, do geniza, right? They're forbidden. Orla in general is forbidden to benefit from. All their fruits are forbidden to benefit from, anything that's orla. And anyone who says, right, against these chachmei pumbedita, that there's no orla in chutz la'aretz, he now curses them. He says, he will not have a nim v'nechad, they will not have great-grandchildren and grandchildren, mashlich hevel b'gora b'kal Hashem, who are going to be able to measure out, to the measuring, like a tape measure, to measure out their land. It comes from a pasuk. And they will not measure out their land in Israel, meaning they will get punished for not, and punished in what way? If they don't keep orla outside of Israel, then they won't be able to get land in the land of Israel. The inu, now they say, well, okay, so Rabbi Yochanan was very against this whole thing and even said, don't even tell anyone about the safek orla halacha, because that's what he believed, that's what was causing people to mess up on this halacha, because they said, safek is allowed, well, then it's a free-for-all, and then obviously there's just no such thing as orla. The inu kiman savur. Well, then what were these chachmei pumbedita thinking? So Tanya, they must have been holding by the following bright, and here we see the different approaches. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Dormaska, Shamar Mishum Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Shamar Mishum Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Shamar Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Agadol. Okay, we get this long tradition of rabbis who all passed down this tradition from Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol. Ein orla b'chutz la'aretz. He said it very simply. There is no orla. Now, wait a minute. Let's go back to our Mishna. What did our Mishna say? Tanakama said, right, we have mitzvot dependent on the land, mitzvot not dependent on the land. And then we had these exceptions. There's some mitzvot dependent on the land that also exist outside the land of Israel. What were they? Orla and kelaim. Came Rabbi Eliezer, who I believe is Rabbi Eliezer Agadol, and said, even chadash, meaning in addition to orla and kelaim, also chadash. So how could you possibly say, even means even in addition? So he must have thought that orla is outside of Israel. So how could they be basing this all on Rabbi Eliezer Agadol? So they say tnei chadash. Oh, skip the word af, even. He just said chadash, meaning I disagree with you about those two. I only think chadash. And then we have a whole different understanding of our mission. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Orla b'chutz la'aretz halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Now, again, we're repeating, we saw this before, that Ula said this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now Rabbi Asi says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that orla and chutz la'aretz is halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Now, by the way, I told you in the beginning to pay attention. This was Rabbi Yochanan, the same Rabbi Yochanan who got all upset at the people in chutz la'aretz who weren't keeping it, because if it's just a minhag, then okay, so people aren't keeping the custom. But because he viewed it as halacha l'Moshe miSinai, he took it very seriously and was very bothered that people weren't doing this. If you all hold, right, if you hold by Rabbi Eliezer, the way they understood Rabbi Eliezer, it's not actually forbidden, and it's just a minhag, so then we can be much more lenient about it. So now Rabbi Asi quotes this halacha. And the reason why we're getting this again is before Ula quoted, and then there was a whole discussion between him and Shmuel, or Rabbi Yehuda about Shmuel's opinion and the debate between them. Now we're going to have another question asked to Rabbi Asi, who quoted this from Rabbi Yochanan. Amarli Rabbi Zera Rabbi Asi. V'hatanya, but wait, how can you say it's halacha l'Moshe miSinai? Doesn't it say safek orla ba'aretz asur b'surya mutal? And whether or not you read these words, but b'chutz haaretz yoreh v'loked. Point being, now here we come to deal with this issue that really doesn't make so much sense, which is, if orla is a halacha l'Moshe miSinai outside of Israel, then why on earth are we going to be lenient when it comes to a safek? Makes no sense, right? What's this distinction? If something's asur, then we're gonna. If you're not sure if it's orla, and forget about how far they even go, that you can even watch him maybe pick the fruits, and as long as you didn't pick them yourself, or depending on how you understood it, but that we're going to permit that kind of thing, it makes no sense. So when he asked Rabbi Asi when Rabbi Zera asked Rabbi Asi that question, right? That again, If you view it as a custom, then it's very easy to say, oh yeah, we could be very, very lenient about it, and people can give people their orla fruits, no problem, and just don't tell anybody. If it's just a custom, it's very easy to say that. If it's halacha Moshe Sinai, none of these halachot make any sense. So he was silent for an hour. It doesn't mean exactly an hour on the clock, but his immediate reaction was, not sure what to say. You're right. This really doesn't make sense. Amar le. But then he said to him, and with this we're going to end the orla sugya, emakach nema, sveka mutar v'da'asu. He said, perhaps the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, when it came down, this oral tradition that was passed down for many years, the way the tradition was passed down is, there is orla in Israel, outside of Israel, but it's only vadai orla. There is no law of safek. And then as long as it was passed down that way, then we have no question about it. And then that's how we understand why that Mishnah makes any sense, if you're going to say it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay? First, we brought that Mishnah saying that Mishnah seemed to support the halacha l'Moshe Sinai approach because it showed orla was stronger, was more strict than kelaim. But then we bring that same Mishnah and we say, but it makes no sense. Why should we be so lenient when it comes to safek? It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. To which we answer, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai was the following: if it's doubt, orla in doubt, in Chutzpit, there's no orla at all. Only a vadai orla is going to be a problem outside of Israel. Okay, and that's how we end our sugya. So again, we saw these different approaches. Is it just a custom, or is it halacha Moshe Sinai? And then we saw historically kind of what happened. Rabbi Yochanan's reaction to them. He really didn't like that people weren't even keeping this halacha in general. Right? Forget about safek, but the safek was causing people to think that there is no orla at all. Right? And at least it's at least admit it's a minhag, if not. According to him, he thought it was halacha Moshe Sinai, and therefore he told people, just don't publicize this halacha. It's very interesting. It's an explicit Mishnah, but he said, don't publicize this Mishnah, right? Like, I wonder what he meant. Take it out of your books, but or just maybe, make sure not to teach that perek in Zraim. By the way, it happens to be, I looked it up. It's the last Mishnah in kelaim, which is just interesting, in orla. Okay, moving on. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're on kelaim. Now, same Rabbi Yochanan, notice what he says about kelaim. Lokin al ha-kelaim dvar Torah. If you plant mixed breeds in your field outside of Israel, he's clearly talking about outside of Israel, otherwise there'd be nothing to be saying here, you get lashes from the Torah. Now, this doesn't make much sense, because how can you get lashes from Torah law by Torah if, what did we say? Amalei Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosef, but it said in the Mishnah that we just read, the Mishnah we read at the end of yesterday's stuff, ha-kelaim midivrei sofrim. Kelaim is only rabbinic. How could you possibly get lashes for kelaim? So the Gemara answers, and now we're going to learn a whole bunch of things about kelaim. What are mixed breeds? What's the prohibition? Where does the prohibition apply? What's more? We're going to have 3 levels, okay, of severity. Lo kashya kam b'kelei hakerem kam b'harkavat ilan. Okay, we have 2 different things. Now we're going to get to 3. So I'll already give you all 3 right now and the gradations. The thing that's the most kelaim, what is kelaim basically? Okay, and we'll see this pasuk in a minute, so I'll already read it to you. In Vayikra Yud Tet, it says, Ek chukotai tishmoru, keep my laws. Behem techa lo tarbia kelaim, don't mix 2 animals together to, breed a new type of animal. Sadcha lo tizra kelaim, don't plant in your field mixed, diverse kinds. Ubege kelaim shatnez lo yala alecha, and don't wear shatnez, right? Clothing mixed with wool and linen together. Now, the assumption here is that what you're doing is basically trying to play God, okay? Kind of like Migdal Bavel, building a tower to God. We're trying to play God and be creative. Now, of course, we're commanded to be creative. That's what we're supposed to do. But there's a limit. God says, this is the limit, okay? It's hard for us to understand fully, but it seems to be this limit of you're breaking the Maaseh Bereshit. I'm the creator, not you. Now, when does that happen in kelaim? So if you graft a tree, right? You take 2 different breeds, right? 2 different things, graft them together, that's the worst, because that's really creating a new breed of tree. The kelaim we generally talk about in the Gemara is not that. I mean, they talk about that obviously, but often it'll be more this issue of planting things within a certain proximity. If things are too close, okay, and now we're going to get to kilei akarim, category number 2. You have vines growing and you have crops growing, let's say wheat, barley, and they grow, you put them close to each other. You didn't mix the seeds together like tree grafting, but what you did was you basically planted them within a certain proximity, and eventually they grew together. That's kilei keren. Kilei zra'im, seeds, is when you plant two types of seeds, not a vine, but two types of seeds in the ground, again, within a certain proximity to each other, that eventually they're going to end up combining. Okay. The forbidden nature of kelaim is to do this. Okay. So I see you asked about fruits and vegetables today that are, we eat lots of things that are combined breeds, but we didn't do it. So therefore it's not forbidden because other people did it. Okay. You can look up, I can't get into all the practical halachot. I'm not an expert in them, but that's the basic distinction. Okay. At least that I can buy something in a store that somebody else created. That's not my issue. Okay. So there's lots of things that are like this, tons of things. Okay. That we don't even realize are all these pomelit, right? It's a combination between a pomelo and a grapefruit, right? It's that's why it's called pomelit, pomelo, and eshkolit, which is the Hebrew word for grapefruit. So there's all sorts of things that are, some are more clear, some are less clear. Okay, but I'm sure you can find some practical things online about halacha. We're not discussing detailed practical halacha today because then we'll never finish our daf. So now we have the following, and it's also not our goal in daf Yomi. It is a goal to get the concept so that when you read the practical halacha, you'll understand where they came from. And that's what's important that we're doing today. So we have these three categories. Okay, another thing we're going to learn later today, and I'll already tell you that in order to be chayav, some people think that in order to be liable for kilei keren, the middle category, where you grow your grains next to your vine, you actually have to plant the vine and one grain, like one grape seed, they say, that's the minimum shiur, one seed of wheat and one seed of barley. It's not even enough two, you need three, and do it b'mapolet yad, where you do it like with some implement all at the same time, and only if you do that, you're liable. Okay, there's different opinions exactly about how this works. So now, we start off with Rabbi Yochanan, who says kelaim is asher divrei Torah. They say, what are you talking about? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosef says, but it says in the Mishna, it's midivrei sofrim, to which we answer, harkavat ilan, outside of the land of Israel, is forbidden by Torah law. In a minute, we'll see why. The first category. Kilei keren is only forbidden by rabbinic law. We haven't even gotten to this Zra'im. We'll get there later. Kiddush Shmuel, as Shmuel says, D'amar Shmuel, et chukotai tishmoru. That's the pasuk we just quoted. Now, it usually says, ushmartem et chukotai, which means you should observe my laws, my statutes. This says, my statutes you should observe. Reverse order. So they say, what does the reverse order teach you? Chukim shechakakti lechakvam. I'm actually referring to things I already told you about before. Now, they don't appear in the Torah before this, but what they're trying to say is some people think, and we'll go with this explanation, that we're going back, Rashi talks about this, that what God is saying is, these are things I commanded Noach already, okay? These are basic laws universal laws of the world, okay? Again, because they relate to the creation of the world and going against God and the God created the world. So and then let's go on in the pasuk. So now, because it brings the animal next to the field, we're going to assume that they're similar. Now, what is behem techa? Ma behem techa b'harba'a, right? Basically crossbreeding, putting them together to mate, to create something new. Afsatcha b'har kava. So that would be grafting. That wouldn't be planting seeds in a close proximity to each other. Now, according to Rashi, that we're talking about Bnei Noach, and by the way, his sources, when we get to Sanhedrin, we're going to see there's a whole debate. We know there's 7 Noach laws, 7 mitzvot Bnei Noach, but there's a debate actually about what are the 7. And in fact, if I remember correctly, there might even be a debate about how many there are. I think there's 9 or 11. There's different opinions there. And one of the opinions is, I think it's Rabbi Elazar, if I remember correctly. I couldn't look at Rashi now, but I don't want to spend my time on it. But there's an opinion there that says that kelaim is part of Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. And this sugya is going based on that, okay? Which basically means that if you go with this interpretation of Rashi, this sugya doesn't match the mainstream opinion because it's not the mainstream opinion. But let's just leave that aside right now. Now, if it was a Noachide law, it's obviously not connected to the land, right? It's a universal law. And then obviously it's going to be everywhere. Okay, it's Sanhedrin Daf Samach, okay? Tov. Yeah, I think Rashi doesn't even say whose opinion, but I'm pretty sure it's Rabbi Elazar. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer. Could be confusing. Okay, so now they say the following. So now also, the behemah, there's no issue. The behemah isn't connected with the land. And obviously, if you claim like Rashi does that we're talking about Noach had laws, it's nothing to do with the land of Israel. So and that's how we get to grafting trees is obviously outside of Israel, a Torah law. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan meant. You're going to get lashes if you do that. Now they say, well, but it says your field. Your field sounds like in the land of Israel and it's connected to the land. So they say, that comes to say seeds in the land of Israel is not a problem, meaning kelaim is not a problem in Israel by Torah. Or even really what they're saying is even more so, which is it's actually permitted seeds, meaning if you plant wheat and barley next to each other, that's not even forbidden at all in Israel. Okay, that's what the word sadcha comes to exclude, because that's going to be our range is going to be Zra'im, seeds, planting somewhat in close proximity to each other, totally permitted in outside of Israel. Kilea kerem, vine with barley and wheat, is going to be forbidden by rabbinic law, and grafting trees is going to be forbidden by Torah law. That's our range. So now we get to some stories. Rav Hanan and Rav Anan, it sounds like a bit of a joke, right? Their names rhyme, Hanan and Anan. They're going on the way, they're walking in outside of Israel. They see a guy planting seeds together outside of Israel. Now, should this be permitted? Well, I just kind of told you, yes, it is, but we'll see it inside. Amarle, one says to the other, let's put him in nidoy, excommunicate him. He's doing kelaim outside of Israel and it's forbidden. Amarle, lo chavaritu, you didn't understand the halacha. It's not, Zra'im is not the problem, okay? It's kelaim or the grafting of trees. Then they see a guy who's planting a barley, a wheat, and a vine together. So now, we should put him in nidoy. Now, according to what we learned, you're right, it's forbidden by rabbinic law. No, you didn't really learn carefully enough. Okay, it's not like it's a little, you didn't get your details right. Don't we hold like Rabbi Yoshaya? Now, I told you this before. This is Rabbi Yoshia's opinion. You have to do them all together with this kind of implement, or however you define this, but has to be done in a particular way in order to be liable in Israel for it. So all the more so here, it's not going to be a problem. It's only going to be the way it's forbidden there. And he says it's only forbidden if you do it all together, and he wasn't doing it in that way. So it's actually not forbidden. Rav Yosef was a big rabbi. Ma'arid bizne v'zara. He took two seeds, put them together, right, and planted them near each other. Because what? What do we learn? It's permitted, right? There's no problem outside of Israel. Rav Yosef is living in Bavel. Amalei Abai, and I want you to remember, Abai is a student, and he's going to attack him. And I want you to pay attention because we'll see how the story goes. Abai says, but doesn't it say kelaim are forbidden by rabbinic law? He makes the same distinction we made until now, which is if it's with a vine, it's a problem. If it's not with a vine, it's not a problem at all. Okay, permitted. But after, so Abai questions him, and Rav Yosef answers, and then Rav Yosef explains why is there a distinction? Because kilei kerem de ba'aretz asulim ba'ana. Now we're going to get a reason. Kilei kerem are more strict by Torah law. They're even forbidden to benefit from, and therefore b'chutz la'aretz nami gazru rabbanan, and therefore the rabbis forbidden it also outside of Israel. But kilei zra'im de ba'aretz lo asirei b'hana'ah b'chutz la'aretz nami lo gazru rabbanan. But planting two grains next to each other, two different types, is not even forbidden to benefit from in Israel. So therefore, outside of Israel, we're not going to forbid it at all. But now we get to something very interesting, which is when rabbis or leaders or female scholars, and wherever you put that category, okay, people look at and say, oh, she did this, he did that, that must be teaching me something. You have to be very cautious when you do this. So comes Rabbi Yosef and he decides to change his mind because he sees Rav's garden, okay? Hadar Amar Rav Yosef, la milti da Amra. I said that you can't plant things next to each other, but then I changed my mind because I saw the field of Rav. The Rav Zaraginte, he planted his field, the Bay Rav, the field in his house. Okay, it sounds like he planted it himself, which is interesting to think that Rav actually did the agricultural work, which is possible. Or it could be just, this is the way his field looked. Mashare, row by row. Each row was a different kind. Okay, it was very organized, each row different. Now, for what reason could he be doing this? My time, alav mishum eruve kelaim. Why did he do all the barley, and then all the wheat, and then all the spelt, and everything had its own row? Must be because he didn't want anything to mix. So what do you see here? Even though he lived in Babylonia, he was careful about kelaim. So maybe I'm wrong about this. Amar le Abai. Now Abai, who questioned him when he first wanted to permit, now he's going to question him when he wanted to forbid. So Abai was just kind of playing devil's advocate all the time. Bishlama yashminan arba ruchot haruga vecha be'emtza shapir. This we're going to deal with a lot more when we get to other sugyot about kelaim, which is they give all these measurements. If you have a square, a certain size, then the way you can plant it is one in each corner and one in the middle, like a checker, like a tic-tac-toe board, okay, where you can basically have one in each corner, one in the middle, and with a certain distance, right? And that's how you can do it to avoid kelaim issues. There's a whole measurement system. We're not going to get into it. There's also different opinions about how exactly this works among the commentaries, but that's the basic. If his garden is planted in that way, says Abai, then it would be clear that he's doing it according to the halacha to avoid kelaim problems. But here he has these nice, neat rows. Now, there could be two other good reasons why he planted in nice, neat rows. Either it just looks pretty that way, right? You see, if your field had all sorts of things mixed in, it would just look like a balagan. It wouldn't look very nice. But if it's these nice, neat rows, well, that looks pretty. Or when he sent people to go pick, when he sent his shamash, the guy who serves him, to go pick fruits or vegetables, it would basically, he'd have to go tell them, okay, more vegetables, not fruit. But if things were all mixed up, he would have to say, oh, go there, and the guy would have to look where exactly. Here, it's just very clear. This row is the wheat, this row is the barley, this row is the carrots, this row is the potatoes. It would be very clear, and it would just be less of a bother when he would ask people to do things. So there's all sorts of reasons why he did this, and don't necessarily learn halacha from it, which is a very good message to get across in general about people who look at their rabbis and say, whatever the rabbi does, that's halacha, and it's not always halacha that's motivating the rabbi or the leader or whatever it is for doing something. Okay, moving on now to our next Mishnah. Okay, so we're at the third line of Amud Bet. Kol haoseh mitzvah chat mitivin lo umarichin lo yomav. Now here comes the Yom Kippur Sukkah. Okay, when we were little, we learned, right, there's these books, there's the Rishaim, there's the Tzadikim, and there's the Beinonim, right? There's people who are all bad, there's people who are all good, there's people who are Beinonim, and we're now in Aseret Yemei Tshuva, and what's the idea of Aseret Yemei Tshuva? It's really meant for the Beinonim, okay? It's not just when we were little, we learned this, but sources all talk about this. We're like the people in the middle, and our goal is to basically try to, right, that's why they always have this picture of weights and scales for Yom Kippur, because we want to tip the balance to have more mitzvot than Aveirot. Well, this sukkah is going to really talk about this. And basically it says here, the simple reading of this Mishnah is you do one mitzvah, which sounds a little crazy. All I have to do is one mitzvah. And what happens? Mitivim lo, you get good things happen to you. Marichin lo yamav, you get to live a long life. And nochelet haaretz, and you get to inhabit the land. And if you don't do one mitzvah, what happens to you? Well, the opposite. You don't have good things. Okay, you don't get long life, and you won't live in the land. So, without getting too complicated, really what this Mishnah is saying is mitzvot are very valuable, right? After we started talking about mitzvot, and mitzvot that you can do in one place and not the other, and again, we go back to the Ramban, who had this approach, if you don't do mitzvot in Israel, maybe it's like not even doing mitzvot at all, and it's talking about the value of mitzvot. Women are exempt from these mitzvot. These are mitzvot they have to do. These are mitzvot the father didn't come to do for his son for the father. All sorts of mitzvot, and now they basically say, well, mitzvot are super important, and you get rewarded for doing mitzvot. Okay, that's a simple way of reading the Mishnah, without getting too nitty-gritty into what exactly does this mean? How exactly does this work? And that's what the Gemara is going to do, which is, if we take this Mishnah literally, this contradicts another Mishnah. Our Mishnah implies that any one mitzvah will get you reward. Well, this contradicts another Mishnah, first Mishnah in Peah, which we say every day in our davening after we say the brachot on the Torah. These particular mitzvot that we're going to list right now are mitzvot that they'll be valuable to you in the olam haba, okay? And you will also get rewarded in this world. And what it means, the keren kayemet lo, the right? What's the word for Karen? It's the principal, right? Like on a loan, right? There's interest, there's the principal of the loan. So you're paying back interest, right? But the principal is still there. Here's the concept. You get rewarded, but it doesn't take away from your reward for the world to come. Sounds like most other mitzvot, yes. But the main thing they want to say is it sounds like most other mitzvot don't give you reward in this world. These are the ones that give you this reward in this world. And what are they? Eluhen kibud avim, which we just learned about, respect for your parents. Kmilu chasadim, doing chesed for other people, good deeds. Hachnasat orchim, bringing in guests. Hava'at shalom ben adam lechavero, bringing peace between fellow humans. V'talmud Torah keneged kulam, and the most valuable of all is learning Torah. But it sounds like just these give you this special reward, and not the ones listed in the Mishnah. So how do we explain? First explanation: Amar Rav Yehuda hachi kamar. This is the way to read it. If you have 50-50 zchuyot and avonot, good deeds, bad deeds, going back to our image from before, and then you do one mitzvah, and that's what we talk about, Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, right? It tips the balance. That one mitzvah, any mitzvah, will tip the balance. That's how important mitzvot are. And then it's, right, domeh, as if you kept the whole Torah. To which the Gemara says, Michlal de bahana chafilu b'chadanami. Wait, so then what's the difference between those and the ones in Peah? The ones in Peah are in and of themselves. You just do one mitzvah, you're set for life. What if you do thousands of sins and one mitzvah and you learn Torah, right? But you're sinning all the time. Or what if you respect your parents but do terrible things otherwise? Doesn't make any sense. So Amar Rav Shmaya, so Rav Shmaya explains better. Lomar she'imay shkula machad. What it means is, if you're exactly at 50-50, what we said before in the Mishnah means you need one more zchut to tilt the balance. What the Mishnah Peah is saying is, if you're 50-50, but in the pile of your zchuyot, your good deeds, you have one of these, then that's enough to tip the balance. Like they're heavier mitzvot, as so to speak. Okay, they have more weight to them, so they'll tip the balance even at 50-50. And that's the difference between the Mishnah and the which is all mitzvot, and the Mishnah in Peah, which is just particular mitzvot. That's the way we understand this right now. However, we're going to have a problem with this, and then we're going to have to explain the Mishnah differently because this isn't going to work. So now they say, okay, sorry, all right. Now they question, but wait, according to Rabbi Yehuda saying, anyone who does one more mitzvah, he gets rewarded in this world, ureminhu. But wait, it says in another place, anyone who has more good deeds than bad deeds actually gets suffering in this world. Bad things happen to him. Why? And this is something we've seen a lot of times in the Gemara. If you would look at that person, you would say, this looks like someone who burnt the whole Torah and didn't even leave one letter off. Right? You think of Eov, okay? Someone like that. You look at Eov and you say, you must have done terrible sins. Look at your life. Look how much you suffered. And anyone who has more sins than good deeds, he gets good in this world. You look at that person, you'd say, that person must be a big righteous person. Look how great life is for him. And it looks like he didn't do anything wrong. But what's really going on? What's going on is that God is punishing the good people for all their bad deeds, so that when they get to heaven and they're finished in the world to come, all they will have is good deeds. Because, right, this is what we say, it's kapara for our sins, right? Our suffering is atonement. And therefore, this is obviously a little extreme the way it's describing it. And what it's really getting at is the issue that we always grapple with, tzaddik v'ralo rasha v'tov, right? We see a tzaddik and bad things happen to him, like Eov. We see a rasha and good things. And we say, how could this possibly be? And this is the explanation for it. They must be, right? This is the way the rabbis could grapple with seeing these things. It must be that they get their reward in this world, so that, the evil people get their reward in this world, so that when they get up to heaven, or to wherever they get, right, they're going to end up in hell and not in heaven, and they'll get their punishments. So, and likewise for the tzaddik, all the bad things happen in this world, so that they're left with only good deeds. So that's the idea. All the reward is about the future. So, right, the olam haba, and we understood our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda explained it in this world. So it doesn't really make sense because of this bright. So now we're going to have two explanations. Amar Abaye, one is to say you didn't understand our Mishnah at all. Mitivim lo doesn't mean in this world. Mitivim lo means in the world to come. And this is one way of understanding Abai. He's not so clear about what he says here, but go with this explanation. We give him a good day and a bad day. What does that mean? So possibly it means the following. We prepare him for a good day in the future by making him bad days here. And that's what it means, mitivimlo. Mitivimlo, we make it good for him for the long term, for the future. We look toward the olam haba, for the world to come, and not in this world. Rava wants to keep the Mishnah at simple reading. You get rewarded in this world. How do we deal with that braita, which says, no, you don't? Well, Hamane Rabbi Yaakov. That braita is a different approach. We have a machloket, okay? Very obvious. We have machlokot in all sorts of things. Of course, when it comes to theology, we're going to have a machloket. How does reward and punishment work? Do you get rewarded in this world? Or do you really get punished in this world to get rid of all your sins so that in the world to come, you'll actually get your reward there? So the Mishnah that says in Peah that you're going to get all your reward, that basically, not in Peah, the Mishnah about, the braita that you have a bad life and it looks as if you burnt the whole Torah, that is specifically Rabbi Yaakov's approach. And our Mishnah is those who disagree with Rabbi Yaakov, that don't think that you get terrible suffering in this world so that you can get into the next world and have everything good there. So how do we know this is Rabbi Yaakov? And how did Rabbi Yaakov, even more interesting, how did Rabbi Yaakov come to this conclusion? And we're going to get to a very famous story. Titanya Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Ein lecha kol mitzvah u'mitzvah. So first we're going to see what Rabbi Yaakov says. He says explicitly, Ein lecha kol mitzvah u'mitzvah shektuva b'Torah, shematan schara b'tzida. In other words, there's no mitzvah where it says what your reward is in the Torah, that ain't tchiyat hametim tluya ba. It's not talking about tchiyat hametim, which is resurrection of the dead, but he doesn't really mean resurrection of the dead. He means the world to come, okay? Meaning any reward it says in the Torah, like for example, we're going to get to kibud avim, and respect for your parents, and shiluach haken, sending out the mother bird, is all about, right? It says, Laman yarichon yamecha, Laman yitablach, will be good for you, you'll live long life. Don't understand that in this world. That's all talking about in the world to come. That's what he says. And now he's going to say it inside. B'kibud avim k'tiv, Laman yarichon yamecha, Laman yitablach, so you have long life and it will be good for you. But shiluach haken k'tiv, Laman yitablach barach yamim, same idea. Hareisha amar lo aviv, he gives this example. What if a father tells his son, very famous story, go up and get me some birds. So he's doing both mitzvot at the same time, listening to his father, sending out the mother bird, and he does both those mitzvot. He comes down from the tree, drops dead. Okay. If this were to happen, right, what would you say? What happened to the pasuk in the Torah? And this is basically just saying in general. Tzaddik v'ralo, right? How could it be someone does mitzvot and then gets punished? Be good for you in the world that's forever good, meaning the world to come. And yarichon yamecha, to days that are forever, not days of man that eventually will end. To which they say, who's to say that kind of a situation would actually happen? Well, Rabbi Yaakov Maseh Chazah. Rabbi Yaakov actually saw this happen, and that's what made him decide this philosophy. That's how he came up with this philosophy, because he saw this and he sat and thought. And you might remember this story. This is also Acher. Elisha ben Avuya saw this. So hold off 1 minute. We're going to get there. But he saw this and said, the only way I can understand this, again, these aren't necessarily answers and these aren't necessarily truths. These are just ways that people grappled with these questions that we all grapple with. And what Rava is saying is, this isn't the only approach. This is one approach. Our Mishnah has a different approach. Our Mishnah thinks you get rewarded in this world, right? Abaye thought, no, it's all for the future world. Everybody thinks that, but it's different approaches to how to deal with it. Remember, Abaye also had a rough life. So I think he related to this issue more about Yisurim, and Rava had a much easier life, and therefore maybe it didn't bother him as much. So it's also interesting. But in any case, now we're going to continue along with this. Now they have all these questions on this story. They say the following. Why do you think that the son was doing something good? Maybe at the same time he was doing this mitzvah, both mitzvot, but maybe he was thinking bad thoughts, which the Gemara says, a good action is way more than just a bad thought. And bad thoughts won't get you killed if you're in the middle of doing a mitzvah. Maybe he was thinking about worshiping idols. That is a problem just in your thoughts. How do we know this? From a pasuk in Yechezkel. Okay, where they thought about it in their hearts, and Yechezkel was saying, you're just thinking about what is there, that's a bad thing. So now they say, no, what he said was the following. Isal kadatach, schar mitzvah b'hai alma, amai lo age mitzvot alei, ki hechadilo leite lidei. Rabbi Yaakov said the following: even if he was having bad thoughts about worshiping Avodah Zarah, which in itself would be a sin, the big question is, if mitzvot are so valuable and they do good things for you in this world, then they should have prevented him from having those bad thoughts. And therefore, he still felt like, doesn't matter what he was thinking in his head, he was doing mitzvot, which should have protected him. Right? We view mitzvot as protection. Okay, another question on the story. But don't we know people on the way to do a mitzvah, Rabbi Elazar says they don't get injured. That's when they're on the way to do a mitzvah. When they come back, he was going down the tree, he'd already done the mitzvah, then then it doesn't apply. But they say that's not true. He actually says they don't get punished, they don't get injured either which way. They're always protected. Well, another fascinating line today. Mitzvah can protect you, and going to a mitzvah protect you, but not if you're not careful and you go up on a ladder that's about to break, right? Whose fault is that? It's not God's fault. The ladder was very rickety and it was about to break, and the child was not smart that he climbed up on this ladder. God's not going to protect you from not taking your own precautions. Greatest proof. Shmuel is told by God to go coronate David, King David. And he says, but how can I go? Shaul's going to hear and kill me. Now what? He wasn't on the way to do the direct order of God. Wouldn't he be protected? Well, it was a pretty obvious danger. And therefore, even God can protect from that necessarily. Amar Rav Yosef. Now, here comes Acher. Comes Rav Yosef, and we'll end with this idea. He says, Imalei darshe Acher lahai krak Rabbi Yaakov barbarte lo chata. Had Elisha ben Avuya heard this drasha of Rabbi Yaakov, who in a minute we're going to find out is his, we didn't find it out now. Rabbi Yaakov barbarte. What's barbarte? His grandson. Rabbi Yaakov is the grandson, the son of the daughter of Acher, of Elisha ben Avuya. Had Elisha ben Avuya heard his translation of this story, lo chata, he never would have left the religion. But Acher maihu, what caused Acher to leave the religion? So, some people say it was this story. Okay, this is where we get it. This was the story that caused Elisha ben Avuya to say, I'm leaving religion entirely. It was something else. Lishna de Chutzpit HaMetorgaman, who was killed by the Romans, one of the Asara Hugei, we'll read about it in Yom Kippur also, in Ela Ezkara. He saw that a pig was dragging the tongue of Chutzpit HaMetorgaman, and he said, he saw this and he said, the mouth that spouted Torah all along, right, will now lick the ground, right? What a bizayon. This can't be that there's Torah, can't be there's a God, and he left religion. So now it's fascinating, right, to think, first of all, maybe Acher caused Rabbi Yaakov to really work on this pasuk and try to figure out how to work on this story, and try to figure out how to make sense of the story. And again, these aren't answers that answer all our theological questions. This just begs the fact that we have theological questions and we have different approaches and there's different ways that people view it. I think it's harder for us to understand this concept that we're going to get punished in this world and reward for the world to come because we don't really understand the world to come. And that is an approach, but it's not the only approach to religion. And again, this is two different explanations of our mission. Is it talking about reward in this world or is it talking about the world in the next world? Okay, that's it for today. We will continue with this topic tomorrow. Wishing everybody a great day and lots to think about in the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah.